Can you picture what 20 tons of gold looks like? As you try to visualize it, let me begin my story. The year is 1857, the height of the California gold rush. Thousands dream of striking it rich. It is at this time that the massive sidewheel steamship, the SS Central America, set sail from Panama for New York. On board are not just ordinary passengers, these are prospectors bringing home the fruits of their labor. In their luggage, suitcases stuffed with gold bullion and coins. 3 tons of personal gold, and an equal amount is in the ship's hold, official cargo destined for New York banks. Rumors suggest there was another 15 tons of gold on the ship, a secret shipment to finance the army. But this can no longer be verified. All the documents were destroyed in a fire in San Francisco. The ship sailed into the open ocean under clear skies. On board were nearly 600 people. None of them could have known they were heading straight into the path of a hurricane and towards their doom. The storm hit them suddenly. Imagine its power. Winds of nearly 50 meters per second, a hurricane of such force that it levels everything in its path. And they were in a wooden steamship in the middle of a raging ocean. Water. It always finds a way. The waves battered the hull, and the leak opened in the plating. At first it was barely noticeable, but very soon the thin streams turned into a powerful torrent. Water poured inside, sweeping away everything in its path. It reached the very heart of the ship, the engine room. Icy salt water flooded onto the scorching hot furnaces of the steam boilers. A deafening hiss sounded as the boilers were extinguished one after another. The engines choked and stopped, and with them the pumps died too, the only thing that could have saved the ship from flooding. For 30 hours, imagine, for 30 hours, the crew and the strongest passengers, standing waist-deep in icy water and in complete darkness, bailed it out with buckets. They fought with their last ounce of strength, knowing it was a battle against death itself. But the water was rising faster.
And then the moment came when the Central America gave up. A horrific grinding noise echoed, as if the ship itself had let out its final death groan. Its hull shuddered in a last convulsion and rapidly plunged beneath the waves, taking with it hundreds of lives and tons of gold. All that remained on the surface were fragments and the cries of those who just moments before had hoped for rescue. More than 100 years after the disaster, in the late 1970s, our main protagonist appears on the scene, Tommy Thompson, a young, brilliantly educated marine engineer. He was not an adventurer in the classic sense. No, he was a scientist, obsessed with an idea. While everyone else was searching for treasure in shallow waters, where everything had long since been dug up and looted, Thompson looked in the other direction, into the depths. His brilliant hypothesis was that the real, untouched treasures lay where no one else could reach, where ordinary adventure seekers wouldn't dare to go. He was irritated by the unprofessionalism of so-called treasure hunters. They relied on luck, old maps, and rumors. Thompson, however, believed in systems, technology, and cold mathematical calculation. He chose the Central America as his target, not simply because of the vast amount of gold, but because it was the most complex and ambitious challenge. No one knew exactly where it had sunk. Its location was the greatest maritime mystery. And he approached this mystery not with a shovel and a metal detector, but with a pencil and paper. Alongside his friend, geologist Bob Evans, they spent 4 years immersed in archives and libraries. They studied the logs of other ships, captains' records, old newspaper clippings, and weather reports for September 1857. They pieced the data together like a puzzle. The captain of the Norwegian vessel Ellen had recorded one set of coordinates where he picked up survivors. The schooner El Dorado, which passed by just an hour and a half after the sinking, noted a different location in its log, nearly 100 kilometers away. Who to believe?
Their breakthrough came from a discovery in the archives of Savannah. They found a note about the arrival of another ship, the Saxonia, which had taken on board several passengers from the Central America. The coordinates from this note confirmed that the captain of the Ellen had been right. Thomson and Evans didn't just find a point on a map. They created a highly complex mathematical model that accounted for the Gulf Stream currents, wind force, the drift speed of debris, and data from all the ships that were in the area on that fateful day. They calculated the probability of the ship's location down to a percentage. This wasn't a treasure hunt, it was a scientific endeavor, and it was destined to succeed. So Thomson had a theory, a mathematical model, and confidence, but he lacked the most crucial thing: money. The required sum was colossal. He needed to charter a specialized research vessel, acquire unique equipment for scanning the ocean floor at extreme depths, and assemble a team of the best specialists. This is where another of Thomson's talents emerged: his ability to persuade. He wasn't just an engineer, he became the face of an entire campaign. He met with potential investors and spoke about his project with such passion and certainty that people couldn't resist. He wasn't just selling them a share in gold, he was selling them a dream, a chance to be part of the greatest historical discovery. In the end, 16 individuals agreed to invest a total of nearly $13 million in this venture. According to the contract terms, the investors were to receive 2/3 of any gold found. Thomson and his team would divide the remainder. But the most valuable find for Thomson wasn't an investor. It was a 40-year-old geophysicist named Mike Williamson. His firm had just acquired a unique sonar system, one of the few in the world capable of scanning the ocean floor at depths of up to 2 kilometers. Without this machine, finding the sunken ship would have been impossible.
In the summer of 1986, the specially equipped vessel RV Arctic Discoverer set sail. But the ocean wasn't going to give up its secrets easily. The crew was plagued by constant equipment malfunctions, less than ideal weather, and powerful currents. Their task was to comb a search area of 3,500 square kilometers, like finding a needle in a haystack, at extreme depth with gear that kept breaking down. Thomson and Williamson argued constantly. The usual calm geophysicist would emerge from Thomson's cabin shaking with rage. They disagreed on the search grid, the methods, and the interpretation of data. The tension on board was immense. 40 days of searching yielded no results. It began to seem like their entire venture was a colossal mistake. Then, just as hope was nearly exhausted, a miracle occurred. Thomson's mathematical model held true. Williamson's sonar detected a distinct, incredibly large object on the seabed, right in one of the highest probability zones. The Central America lay at a depth of 2,200 meters, roughly 300 kilometers off the coast of South Carolina. The initial victory was immediately followed by new paranoia. Thomson knew competitors were watching. If word of their success leaked, other salvagers with equally powerful equipment would rush to the site. He acted swiftly. Immediately upon return, he filed a claim and managed to secure exclusive rights to the wreck site. Now the gold wasn't going anywhere. All that remained was to recover it. Now began the most difficult part. They had to not just find the ship, but retrieve the gold from a depth of over 2 kilometers. This is a depth where the pressure can crush a submarine. No diver in the world could descend that far.
Therefore, Thomson had to become not just a treasure hunter, but an innovator engineer. The entire year following the discovery was spent designing and building a unique underwater robot. He named it Nemo, after the captain from Jules Verne's novel. It was a true technological breakthrough, a remotely operated vehicle, ROV, capable of working at depths no human had ever reached. In May of the following year, the team set out to sea again. Nemo's first dive was tense. Everyone stood frozen by the monitors, watching as the robot slowly disappeared into the dark abyss. The connection kept cutting in and out. Finally, it reached the bottom. The first thing it brought to the surface were several lumps of coal, the very same coal that had fueled the Central America's boilers. This was the proof. They were exactly in the right place. The team was ecstatic. But this was only the beginning. Throughout 1988, Nemo made dozens of dives. It methodically surveyed the wreckage, which was scattered over a vast area. It was painstaking work, operating the robot from the surface ship using low-resolution cameras, attempting to grasp the slippery ingots with its manipulators. And they succeeded. Gradually, step by step, they brought the first batch of treasure on board. 2 tons of gold, bullion, coins, nuggets, everything that had lain on the ocean floor for 131 years. A historic find, a world sensation. When their ship returned to port, it was greeted by a brass band and crowds of journalists. Tommy Thompson stood on the deck as a victor. He told the press, "We hope to get rich." His brilliant plan seemed to have worked perfectly. He had outmaneuvered everyone, proved he was right, and now the gold, the very reason for it all, was in his hands.
But he did not yet know that this gold would very quickly become not a reward, but a heavy burden dragging him down. The triumphant welcome in the port was not the finale of the story, but merely the end of its brightest chapter. Ahead of him lay lawsuits, betrayal, and flight. And this is where they appear. Not pirates with sabers or villains in masks, no. Thompson's opponents turned out to be far more serious. They were insurance companies. Imagine this. The year is 1857. The gold cargo on the Central America was insured. When the ship sank, London and New York insurance firms paid out the full value of the lost gold to their clients. According to the law, after these payouts, the insurance companies became the legal owners of everything that lay on the seabed. They had tried to find the ship themselves, but 19th century technology didn't allow it. Then, 130 years later, along comes some upstart engineer with his robot and declares the gold is now his. The insurers were furious. 39 companies, the descendants of those who had paid the claims, filed a united lawsuit. Their claim was simple: return our gold. An epic, decade-long legal battle began. Thompson was trapped. He couldn't continue recovering the remaining gold because the wreck site was now under dispute. He couldn't sell what had already been recovered because the gold was seized. His entire fortune was frozen. He was sitting on millions but couldn't spend a cent. He hired the best lawyers and waged an exhausting war in courtrooms. And after nearly 10 years, in 1996, he achieved what seemed like an impossible victory. The court ruled that his discovery company had the right to 92% of all the recovered gold. The insurers, who hadn't even known the wreck's exact location, received a mere 8%. It seemed like the moment of triumph had finally arrived. Thompson could now legally sell a portion of the treasure. He made about $50 million from the sale. He had all the money he needed to repay those who had believed in him, the investors who had given him $13 million, and the team that had been through it all.
But instead, Thompson makes an unexpected and fateful turn. He simply disappears, and all the money disappears with him. The investors and team members, including the very geophysicist Mike Williamson, who found the ship with his sonar, receive nothing. Absolutely nothing. They waited years for a reward for their faith, only to be met with silence and rumors that Thompson had vanished without a trace. Overnight, he transformed from a victim of circumstances into the main villain of this story, and what followed was a manhunt. This wasn't just life on the run, it was a complete descent into the underground, a transformation into a ghost. Tommy Thompson, the brilliant engineer, was now America's most wanted fugitive. He knew everyone would be looking for him: federal agents, private investigators, and perhaps even his former investors. So his plan was incredibly complex and meticulously detailed. He and his assistant, who was also his lover, Allison Antiquaire, literally vanished into thin air. They moved to Florida, but not to Miami, to a quiet, unremarkable town called Vero Beach.
Thompson rented a luxurious mansion there, but paid for it not with a bank transfer, but with cash, in stacks of damp bills that he apparently stored in some box. He completely abandoned digital life. No bank cards, no email, no calls from a personal phone. All communication was done through disposable cell phones. Marshals later found 12 such phones in the house. Buy, use, discard. He had fake documents under another name. He studied books like How to Be Invisible and applied all those methods in practice. He lived in constant paranoia. In the abandoned mansion, investigators found piles of junk, legal documents, old newspapers, hundreds of empty vitamin bottles, the traces of stress and isolation. Allison Antiquaire became his only link to the outside world. She was the one who would step outside to buy food or send a letter. They developed an elaborate system of secrecy. When they needed to go somewhere, they never used just one car. First, they walked, then took a bus, then caught a taxi. They constantly looked over their shoulders, checking if they were being followed.
U.S. Marshals later admitted that Thompson was perhaps the most intelligent fugitive they had ever pursued. He was mentally several steps ahead of them. He wasn't hiding in a bungalow in Mexico. He was living in luxury, right under their noses, and they couldn't find him for years. He was playing cat and mouse with them, and he was winning. But all secrets eventually come to light. Surveillance was established on Allison, and in January 2015, agents tracked her to a modest room at a hotel in the resort town of Boca Raton. When they broke in, they found a gray-haired, aged man inside. It was Tommy Thompson. In the room were safes. Inside them, suitcases stuffed with $420,000 in cash and documents showing that he and Antiquaire were planning to flee the U.S. and seek asylum in another country. Their dreams of freedom collapsed in an instant. The arrest ended the years-long chase, but not the story. For Tommy Thompson, court was not the end, but merely a transition into a new, final chapter of his confinement. In April 2019, more than 30 years after the treasure's discovery, 12 crew members and investors finally received their shares. The amounts turned out to be laughably small compared to what they had hoped for. Instead of millions, thousands of dollars. A bitter disappointment after a decade of waiting. Mike Williamson, the geophysicist whose sonar found the ship, said, "It was a great adventure, but the aftermath, the injustice, I'm glad it's all over." But for Tommy Thompson himself, nothing ended. He was refused release. The reason is simple and cynical. He still refuses to disclose what happened to 500 gold coins with a total value of $2 million. The judge believes he is willfully withholding information, either to keep a final bargaining chip or simply out of stubbornness.
Thompson tells a fantastical story. He claims that in 2010, through dubious internet forums, he found an anonymous courier who allegedly agreed to transport the coins for storage in Belize. According to him, Allison Antiquaire personally handed 4 or 5 suitcases filled with gold to a stranger. After that, both the courier and the coins vanished without a trace. The judge, of course, did not believe this fairy tale. His conclusion is simple. Thompson still holds the secret and is using it as a final bargaining chip with the justice system. Therefore, he remains in prison for contempt of court, not for the original crime, but for his silence. His cousin once said, "If he had a chance to start over, he would never have gone looking for that gold. No one would throw their life away for something yellow and heavy." The irony is absolute. The brilliant engineer who outsmarted the ocean and his competitors was ultimately defeated by his own greed and stubbornness. He found the greatest treasure in American history, but lost everything in the process: his reputation, his freedom, and his future. He is imprisoned in a cage, the key to which exists only in his own mind, and he refuses to turn it. So what are we left with in the end? A story that began as a Hollywood tale of a genius scientist conquering the ocean turned into a dark parable about how treasure can destroy a life. Tommy Thompson possessed a brilliant mind, determination, and the courage to challenge the impossible. He achieved what was considered unthinkable, using science and technology to solve a century-old mystery. In that moment, he was a hero. But then greed and fear took over, the fear of losing what he had worked so hard to gain, and the greed that led him to betray those who believed in and supported him. His journey took him from discoverer to fugitive, from a respected engineer to an inmate who sits in prison for years because he cannot let go of one final secret. It is a stark reminder that the greatest challenges we face are often not external obstacles, but the flaws within ourselves. His legacy is no longer one of innovation and discovery, but a cautionary tale of a victory that became a defeat, and a treasure that cost a man his freedom. The ultimate poetic justice is that the man who mastered the depths of the ocean is now trapped in the depths of his own making.
His fate is the most vivid example that money is not everything. He found tons of gold, but it brought him no freedom, no happiness, no peace. Only paranoia, loneliness, and a prison cell. The greatest irony is that if he had honestly shared the gold from the very beginning with everyone who helped him find it, he would have become a respected millionaire, a legend, an author of books, and a hero of documentary films. But he chose a different path, and he lost. His story makes one wonder, what truly is treasure? Bullion lying at the bottom of the ocean? Or freedom, reputation, and the ability to live without looking over one's shoulder? Tommy Thompson traded all of that for what ultimately turned out to be just a heavy yellow metal. This was not just a story about a treasure hunt. It was a story about obsession, about how a single idea can completely consume a person, blind them, and ultimately destroy them. Tommy Thompson conquered the ocean depths, but could not overcome his own greed. He outsmarted competitors and insurance companies, but betrayed those who trusted him the most, his friends and partners. He won the main battle, but lost the entire war for his own life. His legacy is not the tons of recovered gold, but a warning, a stark example that true wealth is not what lies in a chest at the bottom of the sea. True wealth is reputation, freedom, friendship, and a clear conscience, everything he so easily sacrificed for the glitter of a yellow metal. He remains behind bars, not because he stole gold from insurance companies, but because he cannot part with the final secret, the last piece of his cursed treasure. He has become a prisoner of his own obsession. So in the end, the gold of the Central America did indeed remain at the bottom. It dragged down the life and destiny of the man who dared to disturb it.